I remember thinking, you guys are crazy. There ain't no Joseph Smith dude who talked to Jesus later and people came down from the sky. You're out of your mind.
Make no mistake about it. You were born to be a true millennial.
Welcome to True Millennial. I am Parker Welbeck, and today I have with me Alan Jones from Colorado. Has an amazing story, amazing testimony. Recently joined the church. How long ago did you join?
It was March of last year.
Year and a half ago. So my cousin Brock Fabrizio just got back from his mission and shared Alan's testimony in his homecoming address. And it's an amazing story that I wanted to get him on and just share it with all of you. So Alan, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, your religious background, and just tell us your story of how you came to become a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
So first, thanks for asking me to do this, because I don't know, it reminds me of where I'm trying to get. So I grew up, we're a pretty religious family. We went to church every Sunday. We had Bible studies at the church and we bounced around churches, but for the most part, we were, a God-fearing family. We knew what faith was, and I went to a Baptist school until 8th grade. Yeah, until the 8th grade. So I knew about those things, and just in a different context. I never really introduced to Latter-day Saints until later, when I met my wife, who's my wife today, but
right
at the time. I grew up in Hawaii, and the LDS population, I guess, is pretty large out there. But again, I didn't know about it until later on. I was about 14 years old, but yeah, I grew up in Hawaii. Man, I got into a lot of trouble growing up. A lot of people do. I was into a lot of things, and then I met my wife at 14, and one day she asked me if I wanted to go to church, and she's not very if she didn't invite me to church, I wouldn't know that she was a member,
Gotcha.
She invited me one day, and I sat there listening. This is, 14 years old. I'm 44 years old now, so a long time ago.
Yeah. And
I remember thinking, you guys are crazy. There ain't no Joseph Smith dude who talked to Jesus later and people came down from the sky. You're out of your mind. But I didn't say anything, because we just started seeing each other. And then it was until later on, maybe a couple years later, where I think we're good enough to where I could poke fun at him. And then my nephew, who's I think the same age as me, so he went to school with us. He's her nephew, but obviously she got an older brother, much older brother. So he was going on his mission, and I think that's where I really started poking fun at him. And I was like, hey, is Chucky gonna come home and teach me about Jacob Jingleheimer Smith? It's not funny, but I supported her throughout our entire marriage. We've been married for 25 years now.
Wow.
So we'd go to church and I'd sit there and support it, but I never was like, you're not convincing me. I grew up in a specific religion that taught me specific things, and I was also naive. I thought I could go out, do crazy things, come home, ask God to forgive me, and I can go do the same thing the next day. I guess you can, but my mindset's different now.
Right. So sorry to cut you off. So your religious background was Baptist, correct?
Yeah.
And so growing up, did you, I guess not growing up, but even in these later years with your wife in your marriage, was she ever active in the LDS church? Were you ever active in your church? Do you guys have kids, and how did that work out?
Yeah, so I was never active in any type of Baptist church. The only time I went to church, in my entire, and I joined the military at 18. So we got married, we moved up, and the entire 24 years I spent in the military, I think we went to a Baptist wife, just because we knew we had to change something, just to be better for our family. And but we went to an LDS church often. My wife was still going to the temple. Later on in life, she was probably in her 30s when she started getting back to the church and then going to the temple and then talking to me about it. And that's when I started to, okay, we got to support her. So we all started going. But I never had any intent to get baptized in church, get baptized and become a member of the church.
So how many years of going with your wife and supporting her? How long has she been going to church actively now before you ended up getting baptized?
Oh man, it's been a long time, maybe 10 years.
Okay. So have you been going to like sacrament meeting every week with her?
No,
Oh,
so we were stationed out in Korea, and I think that was the heavy point for her when she started getting back. Told me about temple and what she wanted to do to get back there. So we were going every sacrament meeting. I'd go to all the classes, get asked 1,000 times if I could introduce myself and make sure I told everybody I was a non-member. But yeah, so we started supporting her, and there's 4 kids. We have four kids together. They're all baptized they're all members of the church. The older ones just choose to go whichever way they go now. That's how we got to the point where life changed.
yeah. So tell me about it.
Prior to January of last year, that 5 years was rough, man. Our oldest son had moved out, stayed in Washington State. He was gonna do his thing. We were getting ready to move. The military was moving us out here to Colorado. And then when we hit the ground, my 2 middle kids were hitting their teenage years. And they were a lot different than my oldest son. He was 12, almost 13. He was a good boxer, but that attracts different kinds of attention.
Yeah.
People trying to test you, or people that want you to come hang out with them and go do the wrong things. And he chose that second route, and it got him pretty heavily involved in gangs. The gang structure or life out here is pretty extensive in Colorado. And he got pretty deep into that, to the point where January of last year, he ended up going somewhere to do whatever he was doing and ended up getting shot. He was shot 6 times, and then they estimated there was another 8 bullets that had grazed him.
Wow.
So for me, it didn't change anything. In my head, I just thought, well, I'm thankful he's not dead, but I knew it was coming. It changed for me, and I think it's important to mention that my son has a daughter. That was his daughter knocking on the door there. She's
Oh, wow.
He was 15 when he had her. So you move forward, and we're talking. He's 17 years old, about to be 18. He's shot up. He's in the hospital, and my thought was, "You got what you got, man." That's where it was heading. But it wasn't until the detectives started coming by, and there were 2 other kids that had passed away, and then he was a suspect. So now I thought, well, you learned your lesson. It's time to change your life. And then the thought process was, you're not going to have a life. And I just lost my kid. You're not dead, but you're going to be away for a long time. And that broke my heart, man, because I have 4 kids, but he's the most like me. I boxed when I was a kid. I did all these other things, and he was like following that same path. He just took a route that he chose not to change from. But so we're sitting there in the hospital, and we got, the detective had called me, and then everything changed. Like there's a point where I didn't want to live. This is in a matter of days.
Wow.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel anything. And I started praying. But I was praying for the wrong things. I was praying for God to get my son through this. And maybe not find him innocent, but at least let him have another chance at
Yeah.
in his life, right? Like, let justice be served, but we don't know what. I mean, he got shot. Somebody else was shooting at him. Was it in self-defense? It's all ridiculous, no matter what the reason. But just give him another chance at life. And if you do this, and that was in my prayer, if you do this, then I'll give my life to you. And nothing, man. I just couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't think. And this went on for a couple of weeks while he's handcuffed to the bed, trying to recover from these wounds. But at the same time, being treated like, a suspect in murder. And one day I just prayed I couldn't stop crying. And I'm not a crier, man. I just couldn't stop crying about it. And now when I talk about it, I cry all the time. but I prayed for comfort. And that was it. Comfort, and tell me what you want me to do. And man, it freaked me out, because I came home that night, and Brock and his partner knocked on the door, man. And opened the door, and I was like, in my head, I thought, I don't have time for this. So I don't even think they introduced themselves. I just opened it, and I was like, hold on. And I kind of closed the door, and I called my wife. And I was like, hey, the missionaries are here.
Deal with them.
Yeah, exactly. Deal with these. Your people are here. And she went downstairs and was like, oh, sorry, guys, not a good time. In that 2 minutes, I walked upstairs, and man, I feel like somebody told me, literally, hey, dummy, you asked for an answer, and I sent it right to your door. So I ran back down the stairs, and I asked her, hey, did they leave? She's like, yeah, they're gone. Do you have their number? Because she used to do their little food calendar. Who's going to feed the missionary? Yeah. She used to do that calendar. And she's like, I have it. So, hey, call them, see if they can come back. She called them. I think it was like a Wednesday. They were able to come back on Friday. And man, I've been waiting for them to show up, because things had changed over the course of those couple of days. I felt better. I felt comfort, like incredible comfort. I don't know why. My situation hadn't changed. And they came back, and I don't remember at what point, but we were talking and I was listening. And I think Brock had asked me, do I think I'd be willing to go to church or something along those lines? And I was like, I don't even know where it came from, man. But I just told him, hey man, I'm in. Like, I'm all in. And he said, what do you mean you're all in? Like, you want to go to church? And I was like, no man, I want to get baptized. And him and Elder Tully, they just kind of looked at each other and like blank. So then I saw an opportunity to mess with him, and I was like, hey man, it's not you guys. God's telling me what to do. And then just to give him a hard time, but I don't, to this day, like I don't know the reason. I just know. I knew in my heart. And for a guy like me, you're not going to convince me of something that quickly. So I did 24 years in the Army, like I talked about, and I've had every leadership position up until the pinnacle of where you can be for an E9, for a sergeant major. And man, you're just not convincing me. My job was to plan operations and do that type of, things of that nature. I got to have details, and I got to have facts. And I had no facts other than what I felt in my head and in my heart, that the same stuff I was making fun of for all my life was true. And it just, in my head, I just knew it. I knew that it was true. I knew that everything we had discussed was true. I believed in the prophet, and I couldn't understand it. But it helped my situation, because when I would talk to my brother-in-laws about it, and they're not members, they know me, and to hear me say that, it affects them, like, oh man, I kind of want that. But yeah, I just couldn't explain it, man. It changed me. And up until the baptism, so that was in February when they finally came back through, and in March is when I was baptized. And I was just reaching, man. Every second that I wasn't working or spending time with my family, and I lived away. I was living in Virginia just for work for about a year when all this went down. So my son and I would come back to visit when he got shot. But yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but in my free time, I watched every single general conference that's on the website. I listened to every talk I could listen to, because I just wanted to know more. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose that feeling of comfort and compassion and love. I wanted to make sure that never went away. But it's just man, it's just changed our life, and nothing's really calmed down for us. Our house is still pretty rowdy. I've got, my son is gone it'll be for a while, so his daughter's here often. I've got another granddaughter that's here, so I've got 4 kids and I've got 3 grandkids. I've 2 kids live here and 3 grandkids that basically live here. So we're busy, man, but I always just refer back to where it all started, and some of the things that we talked about, during my time with Brock and his companions. Sorry, I rambled for a little bit.
No, that's beautiful. So what ended up happening with your son and his sentencing?
So my son was sentenced in this May. So he'll be gone for at least 10 years.
Wow.
And it's up to him. And that's at least. The sentencing was 20 with 5 years of probation, 5 years parole. Because he's young, the judge did have some leniency. So he's got opportunities. He's not in a full-fledged facility. He's in a youth facility right now, which is great. Because, he was out there doing grown folk business, I guess you can call it. But he's a kid. I mean, he's going to be 18, but he's still a kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was sentenced, but it was just easier to swallow, and then it's just what the plan is. It's what me and my wife just kept talking about. That's what the plan is. That's what Heavenly Father's plan is for him. That's where he needs to be. And maybe he's safer there. Maybe we're safer there with him there,
Well, clearly it brought you to a come to Jesus moment because of that situation,
Yeah, absolutely. Literally. Yeah.
And so how was your wife? What was her reaction when you told her on a dime that you're getting baptized?
Say a word. And we talked about it. We talked about it later, and then I overhear conversations, or they have a sister thread on Facebook Messenger, because she's got 11 kids in their family, and 8 sisters, and they're all on their little thread cackling about it. And I'll go in and snoop, and when I see, she's like, "Hey, what to say?" I just didn't say anything, because she was in shock. So she was like, "Let's just let it happen.
Yeah.
Nobody move."
Uh-huh. So what do you say to people? I'm sure friends, family, other people in your life have called you crazy, and said the same things that you were saying to Latter-day Saints just a few years ago. What do you say when they're like, dude, are you nuts? Like, how can you believe in something so crazy?
Yeah. And so that's something that, like I mentioned, the people that know, so I don't have like social media and stuff. So I'm not talking to a whole lot of people, but the people
Right.
I talk to, they know me. So it's actually easy because they know I'd never do something like that. So it's been pretty easy. What I thought would be the hardest is telling my mom, because there was a point a long time ago where my mom had said something to my wife. She's my girlfriend at the time. Yeah, I'll just say it. She told her, "You're not a Christian, so you're going to hell."
Right.
And my wife was like, "What?" But so I was like, "Man, I don't want to tell my mom." And I think that's also part of the reason I was digging so hard. Like I said, when I first knew that I was gonna do this, that I was reading everything. I was trying to watch every video because I wanted to be, I guess, equipped with that information.
Yeah.
If somebody was to come at me at talk about my faith or why I did these things, I wanted to be prepared. But I haven't had anybody that's given me issues. There's only a couple people. I would say there's only one person that we get into some conversations, and I wouldn't push the issue, but it's my brother-in-law. One of them. I got a couple brother-in-laws, but I lived with them out in Virginia, so there was plenty of opportunity, and he saw the change, I think, because he mentioned it, and I was definitely trying to get him to go to church and start to see things from my point of view. But there are things that I didn't know how to answer. Like, how do you know? I don't know. I mean, I know, but I don't know how I knew.
Yeah.
And I've had some moments since then where, man, it's where I've prayed for revelation for something just to kind of guide me back on the path. And when I start thinking about my son, I'm like, man, I can't. I'm not doing anything right. I'm just not myself again. I'm getting back into that slump. And I was sitting in my brother-in-law's basement. It's a finished basement where I lived for that 1 year.
Mhm.
But I was praying about my son and thinking about his life. And you watch things on TV and you hear about things in prison. And, man, the guy's a kid. Sure, he can fight, but that means nothing when you're in prison and you got a bunch of dudes beating you. And I couldn't think about it, man. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I would get very emotional. And one day I was praying, just same thing, just tell me where I need to be. Please give me comfort, help my family, tell me where I need to be. And I felt like somebody had just put a hand on my back and just like, hey man, it's gonna be okay. And I've been good since then. With my son's situation. So even this was before his sentencing. So when we went into sentencing, I was just kind of, whatever the outcome is, he's gonna be fine. But I told my brother-in-law that, and he looked at me like I was crazy. but just to go back to your question, I don't think I've encountered that yet, where people have questioned, how did a guy like me make that change so quickly? But if they did, I think I'd have to give them the full version, because there's no short answer to that for me.
Yeah.
I just do. And here's how we got to that point. And, you guys know me and who I am and what it would take to change my mind. But in this instance, it didn't take much.
I love the story of how you first gained this testimony from the Holy Ghost, this witness that just happened in an instant. And like you said, you just knew and you couldn't really describe it. And often that's how most people describe it. It's like, how do you know? Well, I felt a witness from God himself, and I can't really describe what that feels like, because it's not a tangible, logical feeling. It's a spiritual feeling.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual experience, and we don't have the words to describe really that spiritual realm, But I thought it was cool how you had that spiritual experience, that connection to God, that answer from Him. And then after, you started listening to all the general conference talks and trying to educate yourself on what we actually believe. It's like you already knew that it was true before you even really knew what we believe, which is crazy. But it's like you were already committed to get baptized before you took the missionary discussions. Am I right?
Yep.
I just think it sounds crazy, but like that's how most people describe it, who have a true conversion to the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's a very personal, it has to be, it's a very personal thing that has to come directly from God to you. And it only can come to you if you seek it out with full willingness. Like you said, I'll do whatever. You tell me whatever. And that full submission is the only way God can come into our heart. And as soon as we allow that, He can touch it in a way that we just know.
Yeah.
So my question for you now is what's been you talked about going through general conference talks. What else have you done to, I guess, maintain that faith and that knowledge, that spiritual knowledge you've gained?
I overthink things. Okay, we were just talking. Well, it was months ago. So I don't know if it really matters, but every time I talk to someone, I ask them, did you guys grow up in the church? Because when they talk, it's like they know everything, right? Like, hey, did you do this, this, and this? Yeah. I don't even know what that is. Let me go back and look. But I gotten the Aaronic priesthood maybe like months ago. But I felt like I wasn't worthy, because that's to me, it was a huge deal, and then you meet these guys like, oh, I did that when I was a little kid. Like, oh, okay, man. But so I think a lot of that was just overthinking. But, I just recently finished the temple classes. So I'm trying to do all of it. I want to get sealed with my wife in the temple, and I'm pretty picky about it. I want to make sure it's back home in the but I want to make sure I'm doing all of it. There's just times where I feel like I'm not doing enough. Like, okay, I go to sacrament and I go to classes in Sunday school, or elders quorum, but I don't think I'm doing enough. And then I'll sit and talk to the elders, and it's just like, you're overthinking it again, man. I guess that to answer the question, those are the things I'm doing. The elders still come over every week if I'm here. And then just was trying to get through the temple classes, and then Melchizedek priesthood, and then go from there.
Yeah. That's awesome. I was going to ask you, what advice do you have what advice would you give yourself 2 years ago to the guy who, when the missionaries came over, you'd say, get out of here, or wife, come deal with these guys?
Yeah.
What advice do you give to that guy and to the millions of people who do that every single day? What advice do you give to someone who just won't give it a chance?
Can you give me 1 second?
Yeah, you got it.
This phone's about to die. That's not what I would say, but
okay.
If it was myself 2 years ago, I think I'd have to say, you really got to open your heart and listen. But I think it's on the person. You're going to have to want to hear what they have to say. And there were times where the missionaries would come by before my conversion. There were times where they'd come by and I would listen along with my wife, but I was listening for the wrong reasons. I was listening to poke holes in the faith and what was being said. But I think if you truly sit back and listen with an open mind, just really hear what they have to say, I think it'd help a lot of people if you could just close your, and this is for me, the person that I was 2 years ago that didn't want to hear it. just listen to what they have to say, and really try to open your mind and your heart to what they're saying. And when it's time, I think you're going to get that revelation. If you're looking for it, I think you are going to get it. I think that's what changed it for me. So I was looking for it.
You had to want it.
Yeah.
It's like, where does somebody have to get in order to want it? And for you, it was your son on a deathbed with a death sentence in prison on the line for you to finally tear down all your walls and just be willing to do whatever. And it's like, what the question I just always ask myself is, besides these extreme situations, what does it take for somebody to just allow it to happen, to allow their hearts to be open to it?
Right.
You know?
And the opportunity for me was there for so many years with my wife and going with my kids. And probably all I had to do was listen with the right intent. But I think that I was there like, do you hear what that guy said? That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of it, I would say things like, Bible doesn't say that. And now when I read through it, I'm like, oh man, it does talk about that. How did I miss? You know?
So it sounds like it just comes down to having an open mind and an open heart and leaning towards faith instead of doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Alan, I appreciate you sharing that, and appreciate your example of childlike faith and complete submission and humility. I know you're going to get a lot of criticism because I'm going to post this, and there's going to be people who are going to say exactly what you used to say. Well, what an idiot that would just blindly believe whatever someone tells. It's like, no, it's not whatever someone told me or what some prophet said or what the missionary said. And it wasn't blind. It was with an open heart, and it was from God himself. The Holy Ghost gave you that answer, and that's something that you can't deny. No matter how many accusations someone throws at you or the church or Joseph Smith, it doesn't change what you spiritually know. The spiritual knowledge you've gained, nothing can supersede that.
Right.
You know? And you'll be challenged. I'm sure there'll be doubts that'll come up. Someone will, give you a hard question, and then you'll have to go and study it. But the key is going to be, when you receive those hard questions, to continue looking towards faith instead of with a doubtful heart like you used to. As long as you are always facing towards faith and not looking back towards doubt, you'll get through all those questions. You'll get through all those doubts. And it's as long as you want it to be true and want to continue growing the faith, it will continue to grow. As soon as you make the choice that you don't want to believe, that you want to be able to go back to some lifestyle thing, word of wisdom, whatever it is that you don't want to do anymore, that's ultimately what leads us into succumbing to those doubtful questions.
Right.
And losing our faith. Is it just comes down to our desire. Do we want it to be true or don't we? We get to make that choice. And as long as you continue to choose faith, there's not going to be any stunning question from church history or whatever that's going to be able to supersede what you've already received a witness of.
Yeah, I think in my case, like you had talked about, we'd hope that, nobody has to go through extreme circumstance to make that conversion.
Yeah.
But because I experienced it, man, I don't think there's anything that can shake my faith, because of what we went through and what we overcame and things we're still going through, and are able to overcome. And it's because of faith. It's because of that.
So here's a question that just came to my mind. How do you know, because you grew up as a Baptist, you've been a Christian your whole life, when you received this witness from the Holy Ghost, how do you know that wasn't a call to go to any other church, to the Baptist church? Was it just because it happened to be the missionaries who showed up on your door that day, or?
No, I think it was weighing on me a lot. And then, my son had a blessing Right, so he chose to go that route with his life, but he also knew where to turn to. So my son had asked for a blessing, and one of the members of the church came to the hospital, and he's also my son's teacher at school, and gave my son the blessing. And I think it was at that point where I was like, that was also a key point, I think, that started making me think that's the direction I need to go. But I still wasn't sure. It was going to be a debate. But again, how did I know it was this course? How did I know that this church was true? Man, I couldn't explain it. I just knew. Just knew. And then I will tell you, one other thing is that every time I've hit a rough patch, and I don't expect that it's going to happen for life, but every time I've hit a rough patch, somewhere out of the blue, your cousin or Elder Tully will call me or shoot me an email out of nowhere. Hey, how's it going?
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's like clockwork. And it's happened a bunch of times. Most recently, they did their little swap out where the elder would come down and they change companions for a day or whatever. Man, I opened the door and Brock was standing there, and I was going through a rough patch. But it's been almost every time. And there's just things that remind me that this is where I needed to be. That there's no doubt that this is God's church, man. This is where he wanted me. There's no doubt. But yeah, I could go on forever, man.
That's amazing. One more question for you. I want to know, because there's a lot of people who find themselves in the situation that your family has been in for quite a while, where there's one parent who is in the church, one who is out or is a member but inactive. Like, that's a very common scenario where one is trying to keep the family going to church and one just isn't having it. Do you feel like your wife and the fact that she was getting reactive and she was being faithful and going to church, and was there anything she was doing that you felt affected the eventual process that you went through years later?
I think probably just her prayers. I think it's been something she's, asked God about for years. And I think it might have just been that, because there was, before the day the elder showed up, before that day, there was no part of me that was going to change, that was going to go in that route. If I did start going back to church, it probably would have been a Baptist church like I'm used to. But there was nothing really pointing me in that direction. I just knew I had to make a change. So I think it's just her prayers.
And just never giving up on you.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard for a lot of us who have family or friends or spouses who we feel like are lost and never going to come back to the faith. And I mean, how many years was it while she was active? It was like 15 years that she was active, that she just prayed and waited patiently and kept loving you through it, and until the day came, right?
Right. And then she was speechless.
But I just wanted to point out that your wife is an amazing example of just persistence, and I assume she just loved you through it all, and loved you for who you loved you for who you were, even though you weren't exactly who she hoped you were at the time, but knew your potential, saw your potential, and was patient enough to wait until you received your own witness.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. That's all we got. Alan is a brand new member of the church, and we'll call him a true millennial. True millennial is someone who is anticipating and preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And Alan has just stepped on that road, and we're excited to see where that goes. Congrats on the baptism, and congrats on the progress towards getting sealed in the temple, and excited for you guys to take that next step.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you.
All right. Take care.